Hey guys, this is Jeff Sparks at Between Paint, a YouTube channel dedicated to fine art tutorials. Today I have a special treat. I have asked any artist who would to send me a painting that we can critique here on Between Paint. Now, a few artists have responded with either finished works or works in progress, and so we have some great content coming up for the next tutorials. During this critique series, I will be applying objective principles that can help each of us make better choices in our own work. As artists, our job is to do this research to find out what these objective principles are and find out how we can build better visual appeal in our own paintings. And so we begin with the good critique. There is power behind a good critique. It helps us understand what is working and what is not so much working and how to change that. And often we need a second set of eyes to help us along that path. So with that preface, let's jump into today's critique. So here we're going to turn to the fourth installment of Between Paint, and we're going to continue the series of captivating design, but today we're going to talk about how to critique your work for and toward captivating or compelling design. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, there are subjective and objective considerations, and really all any of us can do is talk about the objective ones. The subjective ones we certainly can talk about, but not in a real definite sense. But the objective considerations that we use and apply in our own work and help us see where we can establish better design and a more captivating piece of artwork, these we can talk about in roughly black and white fashion. So you'll see those five listed here, and I encourage you when the video is over to come back to this here if you'd like to record these or print any of these videos out. Now, in the context of objective considerations when it comes to compelling design, there's really two things I like to do. I come from a business background, so I use the terminology audit. If you've ever been in a business setting or a tax situation where the auditor has come, you basically lay open the books and you are called to account for every entry into your business profession. Well, the same thing is really true with a painting, and so I borrowed the term audit. We pull apart our painting stroke by stroke and really look at every element, everything that's going on. We're looking at it not as a painting, but as a puzzle and looking how these pieces are fitting together and how they're not fitting together, what's working and what is not. And when we come up with an idea about that, we've established a baseline from which to judge what needs to happen next. And from that baseline, we come up with a plan. Today, we're only going to mention a few ideas about the audit, those five ideas. We'll look and come back another tutorial for the plan, but those five ideas are the focal area, major entrance lines, the design motif, the set value range, and the palette mood you've chosen. These five ideas are so important that I will say this and contend, if you do not have a grasp on these five ideas as you begin your painting, then likely your painting's not going to be as strong as it could be. In fact, it might even fail. When I go outdoors and paint in plein air and take people with me who want to learn how to do it, one of the things you can always tell from a beginner is how is the painting going to work within 5 minutes. In 5 minutes time, these five ideas are either there or they're not. Now, if you begin a painting and any of these five are missing, then you will spend the rest of your time painting fixing the problem or searching blindly for that problem. Now, that sounds pretty heavy, and I'm not believing I'm overstating it. I've seen it happen in my own work plenty of times. If we begin a painting and these five ideas are not in place, then we really scramble the entire time looking for what's not working and why isn't it working. And it can be very frustrating. In fact, oftentimes it's the reason why people quit, because they don't know what they don't know. And that's why this tutorial, I hope, will really help you. So I really want to burn in to this conversation from the very beginning. These five ideas: focal area, entrance lines, design, a set value range, and a palette mood that you have chosen. These five, before you begin a painting or as you're developing the painting, need to really be at the forefront for good things to happen. Now, to help me along with this tutorial, I've asked artists to submit work they're currently working on, and if they would not mind, I would talk about it during this critique. So I was so pleased when the fabulous artist Jean Marie Chapman allowed me to use not only the current painting in progress, but the reference photo from which she is developing her composition. So Jean Marie, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure working with your material. So also, too, you see what's happening. You have the painting in progress, the reference photo from which it came, and that gives us some real objective things to talk about. And we're going to start talking about the very first one. How do we establish the focal area, and what is the focal area? So the focal area in this painting is obvious. It's the young girl's eyes. Now, it's obvious because I've made circles all around the girl, and especially around her eyes. But even if those ellipses, these circles, were removed, any figurative painting that has a figure looking in or out or at you from the painting, that's the focus. We're wired as human individuals to look at other people's eyes. So although it's obvious, the eyes are really the focus, but these larger concentric ellipses, as they move farther and farther away, that's really a communication signal to you, the artist, to remember something. All of the detail, all of the color, the hard edges, or the most contrast, all of the focus and realism, every element that you know that goes into a painting, it is most concentrated right there in the very center of your focal area, the ellipses here. And as you leave that area, bit by bit, they recede. Now, that isn't to say that you begin abstracting the whole painting to where it's nonsensical by the time you reach the edges. That's only to say that when we're talking about edges, color, contrast, detail, abstraction, whatever element you put into your painting, these are concentrated at the focal area and need to, out of necessity, begin to relax and recede their input farther throughout the painting. Now, in the previous videos, we've talked a little bit about that, but here you can really see what would happen if we painted every single detail, the frilly things around the pillow, the filigree on the wood around the bench on which this girl is sitting. If every element here had the same level of everything that her eyes and her face would have, then the painting's not going to read like a painting. It's going to read like a photograph, and that's really such a weak painting when that happens. So one way you take photographic reference is like this. You find that reference, you take that reference and you find that focal area and begin eliminating the concentration of ideas as you move farther away. Now, if any of that doesn't make a lot of sense, just look at any painting and apply this standard to it, and I think you'll see it's really quite amazing that inside the focal area is where the real painting is taking place, and everything outside of that, in diminishing degree, is building up toward that. It can never compete with it. It has to build and be submissive to the focal area. So keep that in mind as you're working. Now, the second thing, going back to our little diagram here, is major entrance lines. They don't have to be dramatic. They just have to be present in a visual way that pull your eyes into the painting. So moving back to the girl, you can see that in this setup, we have some tremendous entry lines coming in here. Now, forget for a moment that you know it's a wooden bench and that's a frilly pillow. Look instead at how the girl is looking. Her eyes are pointing across the painting. That's always very strong. Her arms are sat in such a way that if you drew one of those blue lines, like I have here, right in through her arms, they would intersect with the railing of this wooden bench on which her left arm is resting. Now you see what this is doing. It's making a tremendous little contrast between what she's looking at and the way the eyes are guiding you back into the painting. So if you this really bridges on to the second point here. Let me scoot back up. If an entrance line is doing all of this, it's doing this in service to design. Now, I took all of those marks, removed the photo of the girl, and here's what you have. Here is the core design motif in this painting, and it really reads, if you can fit the girl's focal area, her eyes and her face, into those two red ellipses, and you have some kind of object moving your eyes like the blue lines are moving it in and through the painting, you're going to really have a strong piece. This was great composition and design. Now let me frame that, just crop out some of the unnecessary parts, and this is what you have. And really, that looks like an abstract painting, but all good paintings have a great abstract core to them. And you can see here that this is tremendous design composition. So does it work? Well, let's see. In previous videos, we've talked about avoiding the center lines, and obviously that's perfect here. And the horizon line, even in this painting, we need to have a horizon line, and where you can see the girl's eyes would be, there's a horizon line. So it's really working. The design is sound. So if there's any issues that Jean Marie is going to have with this painting, it's certainly not going to be with her composition and design. It's spot on. But let's continue on with this audit. When you look at this here, you're seeing these phrases to the side here. These are things I'm thinking about. Some of the first considerations is I'm looking at this painting, this design. I don't even need the subject right now. The subject's not important. The design is everything. I know that this is my plan. In the first 3 steps, just to review that, the focal area, major entrance lines, and the design motif, those first 3 steps tell me how I need to proceed in a painting. Now let me pause and say this is a very key moment for artists, because this is where most problems begin. This is where the root of almost every problem you have to struggle and wrestle with begin. Because inside this ellipse right here, where her eyes and her face are, you're going to have the most contrast, the most intense color, most concentration of detail, and the sharpest edges. And as it moves out, as you see my cursor moving out, you're going to have the least contrast, least intense color, usually, more abstractions, less realism, and there the edges will begin to lose themselves, soften, and become both lost and found as they leave the painting. So this is your plan, and this is now what you need to take and build the rest of your painting on. Don't have this, and then your whole painting will have a difficult time developing into something compelling. These 3 are crucial, and they're key. Now, moving past that, though, as we begin to develop our painting, we come to number 4, set a value range. Well, you can imagine I'm trying to teach a tutorial, how hard this is to explain. So I've thought of a creative way to do it. I've taken Jean Marie's photo of her subject, and that's the first picture right there. In this second picture, where my number 2, you can see that I darkened the color. In fact, I put this into Photoshop and I applied a couple filters and darkened it, and I desaturated the color almost to the point of black and white. Now, to me, that really helps me start seeing some things read. Now, number 3, the third painting here, or the third photo, I went ahead and made it a grayscale composite, and you can see here a real beautiful design taking place. And so I set a value range, and this is very important because you can paint willy-nilly into a painting without having any idea what your values are going to be, and it's really going to fail. Honestly, to be honest, if your values cannot read in black and white, they will never read right in color. So moving down to the next slide, I want to show you something here. Now, putting it back into Photoshop, it looks like I just went crazy with a brush or something, a circle brush. But in fact, what I'm doing here is trying to point out some really interesting thoughts. I would recommend that if you're working on a painting and you have a reference like Jean Marie has here, go ahead and put it into Photoshop or Photoshop Elements or whatever digital photo manipulation software you have, and begin playing around with the color. So, for instance, I'm going to show you a couple things here. I went through and color picked all of the basic values in this young girl's face, and that is right here. There are 5 predominant values. So forget color a moment. If you mixed 5 of these values right through here and you only had those to paint with, well, you could make it work. Next, right through here is this young girl's arm, her left forearm, which is sitting on top of the wood there. Now, still 5, but notice what happens. There's something missing in the middle. It goes a little darker. So I like these two things here because the face and the left forearm are the most in light elements of this painting. And look at how still in the middle value they are. In fact, I have another frame I'm going to show you where we put white in here to let you see how far removed from white and from black these gray swatches are. So you see, we've eliminated and toned down some of the white because it was so glaring and established a value range that is really in the light to middle value range for the face. But now look everywhere else. All of these dots along the top are the background here. These dots are the pillow. Funny, isn't it? This pillow cushion back here, the back of this divan, it looks lighter, but it's just manipulating the values. That's what they are right there. All of this down here is these swatches right here. And even this wood right here, there's only 3 values to it, and that's what those 3 are. Looking here at this girl's right forearm, which is closest to us as the viewer, there's in fact 6 different values represented, but if you notice, they're very similar in the value range there. Now, you can get infinitely lost in analyzing values, and this is almost overdoing it, to be honest. Everywhere you look here, I've tried to point out that the subject, the focal point, is her face, her forearm area there, and that is the lightest value. Everything else takes no applause. It takes no honor. It falls in submission to the subject, the focal area. So what would happen if you took some of these values that you found in the young girl's face and then began to apply them on the pillow where you thought you saw highlights or along the wood? Suddenly you would be having a painting with competing parts. And just like if you go see a concert or you go to an opera, you have one singer, you don't need other people stepping up on stage to sing something else. It would be discordant. So one of the things you keep in mind as you're building your values is to set your value range. And I've seen people do this very effectively with 5 values only. But here I'm really introducing a new way to look at it. If you have the resources of a computer and some digital software, why not maximize that? And instead of looking at just one value range, look at a different set of value ranges. But always remember, when you come to what is the subject or focal area of your painting, therein is where you're going to find the highest contrast, the brightest and most vibrant colors, but also where you're going to find the most outstanding values. Every other value, as you can see through here, has to recede away from that. Now guess what? In real life, it often doesn't. So that's where you come in as the artist. You need to make that happen so your focal area will really shine. And that's one of the elements, one of the chief elements of composition. So again, looking at how the white bar and the black bar there really pop, yeah, let's not mess with, that's why people don't use white very often at all. So once we've talked about a little bit here now about number 4, setting our value range in multiple areas of the painting, I want to move now to selecting and commanding the palette mood. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at a painting, if you go outside and paint, or you're trying to paint from a photograph or whatever, so often you feel shackled to the colors that are before you. And really, you need to break that. If that is a habit you're in or a fear you have, overcome it. Get out of that mindset because you personally are in control of the color. Now, that makes sense. You mix the paint and all of that. But what I'm talking about is every painting should have a mood. Color is best used when it is being used to inform and transmit a mood that you have in your painting and you want others to feel viscerally something about your work. So if you use your color well, that's one of the elements of good, captivating design, pulling people in through the passion and pathos of color. But that's in your control. And do not relinquish that control to what literally is in front of you. I've heard of artists who literally will take a swatch of paint and take it up to the model and hold it up against her arm or her cheek or her face and make 1,000 mixtures just to get the right setting. And that's perfectly fine. And a lot of people do that effectively. What I'm trying to say is that in your paintings and mine, selecting color is really important when you have to talk about a mood that you want to transmit to someone else. And so the mood is your invention, and it's your time to play with it. So I'm bringing up now the photo that I took and manipulated, toned it down, desaturated it, and found a tremendous palette of color. Now, we already talked about value, right? And this young girl's face has a grayscale value range. But we're not painting it in grayscale, we're painting it in color. And so right up here, there are those colors that come straight from her face. Pretty amazing, huh? All of these colors have an assigned value. There are, 8 colors there roughly, and there are only 5 values. So these 8 colors fit into 5 values. But look around, look at all the other colors. Not only were the values outstanding in her face, the colors have the most luminosity, the most saturation than any of these other neutrals that were pulled from the painting. Now, I'm not saying this is what Jean Marie should do or wants to do even with her painting. That actually is irrelevant. The point is, what you see here is that color needs to be also seen generated at the focal point at its most saturated, and then as it moves away, begin to desaturate. And that's what you're getting here. If you follow my mouse, you'll see that all of these colors that start coming behind the model have all gone basically to neutral tones. Pretty much the same down here and around the painting. The real color is right there in her face, and that's right along the top. Well, that's great, but what if you don't know what to paint, what to color, that is to paint a particular model? Then I want to introduce you to a quick little trick before we wrap it up here. Here's a photo from a tremendous artist. She, in fact, is a movie set artist, and pardon me, I forgot her name. She builds sets for movies, and she's meticulous with establishing a color concept. So I looked at this and I thought, if I didn't really know what colors to choose, let's say my photo reference was really, wild in its color, I certainly could play around with other reference material and establish a palette myself. And that's exactly what I did here. This was really just a test for myself. Could I establish a workable palette for this model based off of this photo, which has absolutely nothing to do with our model? And I think I did. So you'll see that there are some of the same colors here that I found in the model we were looking at. You'll see a lot of these colors here represented here in this set. So you can take Google or something online and do an image search and come up with colors and then begin playing around with some ideas, pulling colors and building a palette different than what you're looking at. Now, we do this all the time, even out in the field. If we're outdoors painting in plein air, and we are painting and there's a field of green and the trees are green and everything's green, well, that doesn't mean you have to paint it that way. So in closing, I just want to really encourage you, color's important, but it's always in your command. It's your invention. And so as we close here on our final point, play well with it and learn to develop your own palette that really helps pull people passionately into your painting. Hey, I've got to get out of here. This is running a little long. Thank you for listening, and come back for our next tutorial where we will continue critiquing artists' work and bringing out some principles that can help you in your painting. Again, this is Jeff Sparks at Between Paint. Thank you so much.